You know, since it's WrestleMania week, a lot of wrestling is happening in Las Vegas as we speak, or within the Las Vegas region and vicinity. Tonight is TNA Unbreakable, and it's going to be highlighted by a barbed wire massacre match between Sami Callihan and Mance Warner. And that's great and everything. Now, I do want to address, though, something about WrestleMania week that's, and it's also something that happens during SummerSlam week, Survivor Series week, Royal Rumble week, Money in the Bank week. And that is, you have a lot of talent, you have a lot of officials, if you will, going out and doing a lot of PR, doing interviews, either in-house or out of house, answering questions and stuff. And Triple H and Nick Khan did several interviews this week, and they gave some very, I guess you could say in the eyes of a lot of folks, or some folks I should say, some very mixed, polarizing answers. Nick Khan, he was on the Bill Simmons show, and he mentioned to Bill Simmons that he has a lot of respect for Tony Khan's father, Shad Khan, because he is funding the entire AEW endeavor. That it's basically his money that Tony is spending, and he has a lot of respect for him. He has a lot of respect for the fact that he also runs the Jaguars and Jacksonville Jaguars of the NFL, as well as some other sports entities, if you will. But he never mentioned Tony Khan by name because Tony Khan took some shots on him and everything years ago, and, well, let's just say Nick has never really forgotten. But be that as it may, he was asked about, potential AEW talent that could be, contractually coming up on the contracts, if you will, within that company. And he basically said that they are going to be keeping an eye on them, and that when the opportunity comes to talk to them when the contract is up, they will. Basically alluding to the fact that not only will they be talking to them, but they will be doing what they can, probably more so than anything, to sign them to WWE contracts. And look, I know people might find what he said about that very discouraging and all that, but it's the same with any sport. When a player's contract comes up on a team, basically, if you're the manager, if you're the head manager, if you will, not the head manager, but the head owner of a team, and you see that player, he or she's in the final year, and you're like, oh, I want to have that player on my team, you will do everything you can after that year is up. Whether that person's in the playoffs with the current team or not, you will do whatever it takes to get that person, on your roster. A good example is, this past off season in the NBA, the Golden State Warriors lost Klay Thompson to the Dallas Mavericks. And yeah, that was a big blow because basically we lost one half of the Splash Brothers to, potentially one of the playoff rivals to the Golden State Warriors. Excuse me. So yeah, that was a big blow. But that's because the owner saw the potential of how good, Klay Thompson was. He saw the potential of how good Klay Thompson was. It's the same decade ago, if you will, a couple of decades ago, I should say, when Mark McGwire left the Oakland Athletics, went to the St. Louis Cardinals. Yeah, it was a big blow to the Athletics, but basically the owner of St. Louis saw the potential the guy had. Same with Jose Canseco. When he left Oakland, he went to Toronto, he went to the Chicago White Sox, he went here and there, and all because they saw the potential in the guy. They saw how good he was for Oakland, and they wanted him on the roster. Same with the late, great Ricky Henderson. Every team that he was signed with because the owners, sorry about that. Well, like I said, the owners saw how good he was with the athletics and all the other previous teams he was on. It's like, we need this guy. We want this guy. And they got him. Same with Joe Montana. He was in the twilight of his career, but he could still go, right? He could still go. So what happened? They decide, hey, we want, the Kansas City Chiefs, they decide we want Montana. They got Montana. You get what I'm saying? Same with Hulk Hogan. As crazy as it sounds, WCW signed Hulk Hogan because, he might have been in the twilight of his career, but he could still draw. He potentially still had enough in the tank to do what he had to do and help reinvent the business. And guess what? He did. He was able to fulfill that potential that WCW and Eric Bischoff saw that he had, and he himself knew he still had, whether you like the guy or not. So for Nick Khan, as polarizing as the answers were for him to say about them looking at some AEW talent that contractually they would love to bring over to WWE, in the future when their time contractually is up with All Elite Wrestling, it's not a bad thing. It's just business. It's just business. Now, he did say something else about when they sign people, they don't bench them. And look, that is polarizing because there are some talents they did bring back from AEW, or they signed for the first time from AEW, that have kind of been in and out, if you will, on television. Excuse me. I'm getting a little over allergy cough and everything, so I apologize if I'm stumbling here. But basically, his answer of, hey, when we sign talent, we don't bench them. Yeah, it is kind of a mixture, polarizing answer, because there have been talent, as I was trying to say, that they have signed, from AEW or brought back from AEW that have kind of been in and out, if you will, on screen, but are now starting to kind of probably start finding their footing. The reason for that is because they are trying to primarily focus on the talents that are going to be featured on WrestleMania this year, and then after that they'll start rebuilding to next year's WrestleMania, because that's what every year is. Every year is finding the talents, whether it's unbenching them or finding something for them to do. All the planning, whether you agree with it or not, is about getting people to the next year's WrestleMania. That's what this is about. So yeah, what he said about benching them when they, not benching them when they sign them, yeah, it is polarizing. But again, it's about getting the talent, ready that is benched or occasionally is seen on and off on television. It's about getting them ready for potentially next year's WrestleMania. That's what it's about, potentially getting them ready for next year's WrestleMania. And also they know that the talent will not get, the opportunities that they could get if they stayed with WWE. They cannot have the opportunities to have their own schools open and everything, and have it tied to certain programs like WWE ID to help bring in the future of the company, or train the future of the company for a potential run in WWE. So that's why sometimes when you have talents like Natalya and others resign, it isn't because, we're mainstays, we might as well finish our careers here. No. It's about the fact that, they could do good in AEW, and as a result, I should say, an extension elsewhere, because AEW has all these partnerships. But the thing is, them staying allows them opportunities to actually have have opportunities like that more so than ever, because this new regime is like, hey, you want more reps? Go and do it. That's why you're having talents, go and be part of Josh Barnett's Bloodsport this week. That's why you're having Natalya, who's going to be part of it, going and being part of NWA. Because they're like, look, we don't want to lose a talent like Natalya, to the competition, because, we don't know if she's going to get the reps she wants. So we're going to bring her in, we're going to keep her and let her, do what she's been wanting to do. So yeah, look, him saying what he did about them signing talents and not benching them, yeah, it's kind of polarizing and all that. I'm not going to disagree with that. But basically, I think what he's alluding to is, they're just focusing more on the season that's going to lead into the next that leads into the current WrestleMania, finishing that off, and then looking at the overall roster and being like, okay, who do we keep, on the road to next year's WrestleMania, and who do we unbench and call up and sign up for next year's WrestleMania? That's mainly what it is at the end of the day, whether people want to admit that or not. Now, as far as Triple H goes, yeah, he said something that really got under people's skins. Basically, he said essentially that, you shouldn't, that basically just be a fan. It was basically his equivalent of what a lot of talent have said before. Just be a fan, don't criticize. Don't call out stuff just because you don't like the way certain things are going or certain things are priced. Be a fan. Enjoy it for what it is. Now, he said this in an interview with Peter Rosenberg on the WWE YouTube channel. Now, does Triple H have a right to his opinion? Absolutely. Does Triple H know more about what goes on behind the scenes, the ins and outs of WWE and the wrestling business as a whole? Does he know that better than us? The ones that talk about it, criticize and all that. Yes, he does. But does it give him the right to say you shouldn't criticize? No, it doesn't. But I think the reason he's saying that primarily is basically because of the fact that he's basing it off of his knowledge of what goes on behind the scenes, the ins and outs of not just the overall business as a whole, but of WWE. It's basically his way of saying, look, I get that you guys are upset about certain things, the prices and all that, but if you knew what I did, if you knew the ins and outs of what I do on a daily basis, you would understand why your criticisms are unjustified and why you should just sit back and be a fan. So that's his way, in my opinion, of, him, saying what he did, giving the answer that he did. It's just his way of saying, flat out, you don't know what I do on a daily basis. You don't know what Nick Khan does on a daily basis. So until you do, you don't have the right to call certain things out unless you understand the reasoning. Unless you're sitting behind this desk, behind that gorilla position and everything, working day in and day out, you don't have a clue as to what's happening. So please, do us a favor. Don't, for 1 week, and I think this is what he's trying to allude to, not all the time, but at least for 1 week, please just be a fan and leave the criticizing at the door. But what he doesn't realize, Triple H, and I say it with all due respect because I'm a Triple H fan myself, what he doesn't realize, honestly, is that there are fans that do this criticizing for a living. And them pointing things out is just them doing their job. Yeah, what they point out may not be, exactly what, is going on behind the scenes in the company and everything. I get that. And yeah, maybe people like JD and Alex and Solid Monster and Jesse and Argo and, and all them, Andrew Badella, BC Amplified and everything, maybe they don't know what's happening, but from what they see as fans, they just, they look at that and they're like, well, what sense did that, because to them as a fan, it's like, what sense did that make? Or as a fan, it's like, why are you pricing this when people want to be part of this, and yet you're pricing tickets that, that cost basically a freaking mortgage for the next 10 years? To them, that's, they're doing it as fans. That's why the criticizing comes into play. They do it as fans. They're not being actual wrestling critics, being like, well, I'm not a fan, but as a actual critic of sports and everything, I think this is unjustified, and let me give you the experience and the calculations, and da-da-da. No, they're doing it as fans. But as fans, they also do it for a living, okay? They do it for a living. So yeah, they may not know the ins and the outs on a daily basis of what goes on in WWE, but for them to criticize and say what they're saying, they're doing it as fans. They're doing it from the fans' perspective. Like, what sense does it make to charge us thousands of bucks, if you will, thousands of dollars for a nosebleed section at, Allegiant Stadium? Or why does it cost, half of $1,000, for, the far end seats, to where basically you need binoculars to see what's happening, or you need to look up at the screen, if you will, at the scoreboard screen to see what's happening. What sense does it make? It doesn't make sense to them. And that's why they criticize. They're not criticizing because they think they know better. No, they're criticizing because they're fans, and from the fans' perspective, they're letting it be known how they feel. And yeah, do I agree with Triple H by saying that things should just be like they used to be, to where everything was unexpected? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, I do agree with that. But we are not, but he forgets, but he forgets, and he should know, because he's on social media himself, that we are in a day and age where you can't hide anything when it comes to social media. You can't. You cannot hide anything. Yeah, I'll give them credit. They're doing probably the best jobs they've ever done to make sure in this day and age to keep things a secret, to keep things hidden from the fans as to what's going to happen. Because again, a lot of fans predict that John Cena is going to walk out with number 17 on Sunday. And that might happen, but we don't know. We don't know if that will happen. We don't know if John Cena and Cody in cahoots and they're setting the Rock up to be humiliated for the second year in a row. We don't know that. All we know is that we have become invested in this storyline because of what John Cena's done. And that's it. Now the fact that he's not been there, most of the time, has that hurt it? Yes. Has The Rock not being there at times to kind of back John up, kind of put things in his favor, has that hurt it? Yes. Now, John being there tomorrow night works because they're in Las Vegas anyway, so that's fine. But him being there for a majority of the time and everything since the heel turn, except for the European tour and all that, has that hurt it? Yeah. But again, that's where Cody is tasked. This to me is basically this has been nothing more, in my opinion, I think anybody would agree, it's been nothing more than a major test for Cody to see whether or not he is ready. He is ready to be the face of the company, to take on the responsibilities that the WWE champion has to take on, as the face of the company, as the holder of that title. That's what this really is. And at the end of the day, that's what's going to basically result in whatever decision they decide to go with at the end of WrestleMania on Sunday night. That's what it's going to be. That's what it's going to be at the end of the day. Or resultant at the end of the day, I should say. But yeah, Triple H saying what he did. Was it wrong? Yeah, in a sense. Yeah, in a sense it was wrong. But again, he's saying it from his own point of view, working behind the scenes on a daily basis. It's his way of saying, look, you don't know what I do, you don't know what Nick Khan does or anybody else does on a daily basis, so you have no right to say this should be done this way, this should be done that way, or this should be priced that way and this way, because you have no idea. You don't have a clue, period. And that it's just best for you, as a fan, to let things play out and not criticize it. That's basically how he's viewing it. Now, could Triple H also be saying that because he's been told to say that by Endeavor and TKO and Ari Emanuel or Mark Shapiro or maybe Dwayne Johnson? Yeah, there's a good chance he's been told to say that. And I'm sure he's not the only one. I'm sure Nick Khan saying what he did, he was told to kind of say something corporate. There's no denying that. There's no denying, that they were told to say certain things. A lot of the talent were probably told to say certain things as well. All because of the fact that if that is the case, all because of the fact that I believe if that is the case, if they're being told to say these things, which could be probably a more realistic possibility, it's because those at Endeavor and TKO have no, well, except for The Rock, that is, but the rest above The Rock, as are those above him, have no clue as to how the business works. And that's it. Rock could be probably the one that's like, well, if you have, Paul say this, or you have Nick say this, that's not true, because that's, it is about the fans and all that. The people above Rock could be like, yeah, well, here's the thing, Rock. We're in charge of the whole shebang. You're beneath us, so we're going to tell them what to say, whether they like it or not. And that might be the case. We don't know. But whatever the situation is, yes, I admit the answer was polarizing, but I see it from him basically saying, you don't know exactly. And that was my timer going off. I got to turn off the water a little bit. I'm watering the lawn. I got to go take care of that in a bit. But anyway, again, in closing, I think it's Hunter's way of saying, hey, you don't know exactly what we do on a daily basis, on what goes into the planning and all that, and how we got to change things and da-da-da. To me, that's his way of saying that, by giving that answer. That's just me. But again, like I said, it could be something he and Dwayne, maybe, and Nick and all that are being told to say, along with the rest of the talent, because those at Endeavor and TKO probably have no idea how the wrestling business works. And I'm sure it's the same thing with the UFC, because the UFC is under the TKO Endeavor umbrella as well. And they'll probably like, really? You want us to say that? That's not true. But it's because the people running it have no clue on how combat sports, like wrestling, pro wrestling, storyline-wise and all that, and UFC, and that story-driven and all that, shoot-wise and all that, they have no idea how it works and everything. They have no clue how it works. And at the end of the day, they need to get a clue, if that is the case. But I just wanted to give my thoughts on it overall, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are on what both Nick Khan and Triple H had to say in these interviews. How do you feel about it? Let me know down below in the comment section. Do all the things in the description. It will really help me out, guys. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, share the video. And again, like I said, do all the things in the description. It will really help me out, guys. And until next time, I will talk to you all later.